Hello there, and welcome to the Deep Sleep Science channel. I'm so glad you've joined me tonight. Tonight, we journey into a hidden world that exists all around us, mostly unseen. Beneath our feet, between blades of grass, and riding invisible currents of air, six-legged architects build their kingdoms in silence. The world of insects is ancient beyond measure, delicate beyond belief, and more intricate than any clockwork we could ever devise. For hundreds of millions of years, long before the first mammals walked the earth, insects were already here, perfecting their designs, weaving themselves into every corner of the living world. They move through metamorphoses like slow magic. They build structures from nothing. They speak in vibrations and light. Most of the time, we barely notice them. But when we pause and look closer, we discover that insects are not just small creatures going about their business. They are gentle mysteries, each one a tiny universe of adaptation and wonder. Science reveals their secrets one by one, and each discovery is more astonishing than the last. But for now, there's nothing you need to do. Just let yourself settle. Let your breath slow, and let the quiet world of these small, ancient beings unfold before you like the opening of delicate wings. Now, if you're ready, let's begin. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, consider liking and subscribing, or share your thoughts in the comments. It helps others find their way here too. Insects have been on Earth for over 400 million years, long before the dinosaurs walked. They emerged in a world so different from ours that we can barely imagine it. A world of shallow seas and barren continents, where the first green plants were only just beginning to creep onto the shores. While the dinosaurs came and went in a geological blink, while continents drifted and mountains rose and fell, insects persisted through it all, adapting and diversifying into forms both beautiful and strange. They witnessed the birth of flowers, the rise of birds, the coming and going of ice ages, and through all of this deep time, they remained. Small witnesses to epochs we can only dream of. It is humbling to think that when we see an ant crossing our path, we are looking at a lineage far older than our own, a living thread connecting us to an Earth we will never know. There are more species of insects than all other animals combined. Scientists have named nearly 1 million different insect species, and yet they estimate that millions more remain undiscovered, hidden in rainforests and beneath the soil, waiting to be seen. For every species of mammal on Earth, there are hundreds of insect species, each with its own particular way of living, its own shape perfectly suited to its niche in the vast web of life. This astonishing diversity means that insects have found ways to thrive in nearly every habitat on the planet, from the driest deserts to the coldest tundras, from mountain peaks to tropical canopies. And in doing so, they have become the most successful group of animals ever to exist. The sheer abundance of their forms reminds us that life's creativity knows no bounds, that nature experiments endlessly with size and shape and color, always searching for new ways to flourish. A single ladybug can eat up to 5,000 aphids in its lifetime. This small spotted beetle, no larger than a lentil, spends its days slowly patrolling the undersides of leaves, searching for the soft-bodied aphids that cluster there in green multitudes. With patient determination, the ladybug consumes them one by one, day after day, providing a natural balance that gardeners have relied upon for centuries. The ladybug asks for nothing in return except a place to rest, and perhaps a leaf to lay her golden eggs. When spring arrives, her larvae emerge as tiny, spiny creatures that are even more voracious than their parents, eating their way through hundreds of aphids before transforming into the familiar domed adults. In this quiet cycle of hunger and transformation, the ladybug becomes a gentle guardian of gardens, keeping populations in check without noise or violence, simply by living her small, purposeful life. Lunar moths have no mouth and never eat once they emerge from their cocoon. They spend months as caterpillars, eating and growing, storing all the energy they will ever need for their brief adult lives. When they finally emerge from their chrysalis, wings pale green as sea foam and marked with delicate eye spots, they have only one purpose: to find a mate and continue the cycle. Without a mouth to feed them, without the distraction of hunger, they are creatures of pure intent, drifting through moonlit forests like living ghosts, guided only by scent and instinct. Their lives are measured not in meals, but in moments. Each night, a fleeting window of possibility beneath the stars. It is a strange and beautiful existence, stripped down to its essence, and in their silent flight through the darkness, they seem almost like dreams made visible, ephemeral and untouchable. Adult lunar moths live for only about 7 days, focused entirely on reproduction. A single week is all they have. 7 sunsets and 7 dawns, 7 chances to dance through the warm summer air in search of a partner. They do not feed, do not rest for long, do not waste a single hour of their brief existence. Every flutter of their pale green wings is purposeful. Every drift on the night breeze is deliberate. And when they find each other at last, guided by pheromones carried on the wind, they complete the work that their entire life has been building toward. And then, quietly, without fanfare, they fade away, leaving behind only their eggs tucked carefully onto the underside of leaves. The next generation already beginning its long journey from egg to caterpillar to moth. It is a life both fleeting and eternal, each moth a brief spark that carries the flame forward through time. Fireflies flash their light in synchronized patterns, creating living constellations in the darkness. On warm summer nights, in forests and meadows across the world, these small beetles rise from the grass and begin their luminous conversation, each one a tiny lantern floating through the dusk. At first, their flashes seem random, scattered points of cold green light blinking on and off without order or reason. But watch for a while, and something remarkable begins to happen. The fireflies start to synchronize, their flashes aligning with one another, until entire trees pulse with light in perfect unison. Thousands of individuals breathing together in one silent, glowing rhythm. Scientists believe they do this to find mates more efficiently, each male calling out with his light signature, while females watch from the vegetation below. But the effect transcends mere biology and becomes something close to magic. No conductor guides them, no signal tells them when to flash, and yet, through some mysterious interaction, through watching and adjusting to their neighbors, they find a common tempo and hold it through the night. It is cooperation without thought, beauty without intention, a living reminder that even the simplest creatures can create symphonies of light when they move together in harmony. A bee's wings beat 190 times per second, creating their familiar hum. This is not a slow, lazy flapping like a butterfly's graceful rise and fall, but a frantic blur of motion so fast that the human eye cannot follow it, can only perceive the faint shimmer around the bee's body as she hovers before a flower. Each wing traces a figure-8 pattern through the air, twisting and rotating with each stroke to generate the lift that keeps her aloft. And this complex choreography happens nearly 200 times every second without pause, without error, driven by flight muscles that are among the most powerful in nature relative to their size. The sound we hear, that low, contented buzz that has become synonymous with summer gardens, is simply the vibration of air pushed by these invisible wings, a side effect of flight that becomes its own form of communication. Bees use this hum to announce their presence to flowers, to warn away competitors, to communicate with their sisters in the darkness of the hive, and when they land on certain flowers, they can adjust the frequency of their buzz to shake loose pollen in a technique called sonication. It is a sound that speaks of work and purpose, of ancient patterns repeated across millions of years, and when we hear it drifting across a meadow on a lazy afternoon, we are hearing the song of the world's most important pollinators going about their patient, essential work. Dragonflies have existed for 300 million years, practically unchanged. Long before the first flower bloomed, before the first bird took wing, before the continents had settled into their familiar shapes, dragonflies were already perfecting their mastery of the air. Fossils preserved in ancient stone show us creatures nearly identical to the ones we see today. Their four wings spread in the same distinctive cross, their enormous eyes dominating their heads just as they do now. And some of those ancient species had wingspans as wide as a hawk's, giants of an era when oxygen was richer and insects could grow to sizes we can barely imagine. But the design was so perfect, so precisely suited to the task of aerial hunting, that evolution found little reason to change it. And so the dragonfly persisted through mass extinctions and climate shifts, through the rise and fall of dinosaurs and the slow emergence of mammals, always hunting, always flying, always watching the world with those vast compound eyes that can see in nearly every direction at once. When we see a dragonfly hovering over a summer pond, sunlight flashing from its iridescent body, we are looking at a design that has outlasted empires and epochs, a form so timeless it seems less like an insect and more like a small piece of Earth's memory, made flesh and given wings. Some species of cicadas spend 17 years underground before emerging for a single summer. For nearly 2 decades, they live in darkness beneath our feet, pale nymphs slowly sipping sap from tree roots, growing incrementally through molt after molt, waiting with a patience we can scarcely comprehend, for a signal we do not understand. They measure time in a way that baffles scientists, counting the years somehow, tracking the passage of seasons through changes in the sap they drink, or perhaps through some internal clock wound at the moment of their hatching. And then, when 17 summers have passed, when the soil reaches exactly the right temperature, they begin to dig. On a single night, millions of them emerge together, crawling up tree trunks to split their skins one final time and unfold their delicate wings into the warm air. For 6 weeks, the forest rings with their song, a droning chorus so loud it can drown out conversation, as the males call desperately for mates, trying to compress a lifetime's worth of purpose into one brief window of opportunity. And then, as suddenly as they appeared, they are gone. Their eggs laid in slits cut into tree branches, their bodies scattered on the ground to feed other creatures, and the forest falls silent again. It is a life of extraordinary extremes, of patience measured in decades and urgency measured in days. And in their strange synchronized emergence, they remind us that time moves differently for different creatures, that what seems like forever to us might be just one patient breath in the life cycle of an insect. Butterflies taste with their feet, sensing sweetness through delicate receptors. When a butterfly lands on a flower, she does not immediately unfurl her coiled proboscis to drink. First, she stands still for a moment, her 6 feet pressed against the petals, and in that moment she is tasting, reading the chemical signature of the plant through sensors far more sensitive than our tongues could ever be. Each foot is covered with chemoreceptors that can detect the faintest traces of sugar and other compounds, telling her instantly whether this flower is worth visiting, whether it holds the nectar she needs, and in the case of female butterflies searching for plants to lay their eggs upon, whether this is the right species to host her caterpillars. It is a sense we cannot imagine, as if we could taste our food simply by walking across a table, and it allows butterflies to make split-second decisions about where to feed and where to reproduce without wasting precious energy. Some butterflies can detect sweetness at concentrations far too dilute for us to perceive, finding hidden reserves of nectar in flowers that seem dry to our clumsy senses. And others can identify specific plant chemicals that signal the perfect host for their particular species. In this way, each landing becomes an act of intimate chemical conversation, a quiet exchange between plant and insect that has been refined over millions of years into a dance of almost perfect efficiency and grace. The painted lady butterfly migrates 7,500 miles across continents and generations. This journey is not the work of a single butterfly, but rather a relay passed from mother to daughter to granddaughter across thousands of miles and several months, each generation picking up where the last one left off in a journey that spans from the deserts of North Africa to the Arctic Circle and back again. Individual painted ladies live for only a few weeks, just long enough to fly northward, feed on flowers, mate, and lay eggs on thistle plants before their wings grow tattered and they fall away. Their offspring emerge, feed, transform, and continue the journey north, driven by instincts encoded deep in their genetic memory, following invisible pathways written in the angle of sunlight and the pull of magnetic fields. By the time autumn arrives, the descendants of those African butterflies might be fluttering through Scandinavian meadows, and then they turn around and begin the long flight south again, riding favorable winds, stopping to refuel on nectar, completing in reverse what their ancestors began. No single butterfly ever sees both ends of the journey. No individual ever completes the full circle, and yet the migration continues year after year, a seamless thread of life passed from wing to wing across the turning seasons. It is a feat that seems impossible for something so fragile, so easily blown off course by a strong breeze, and yet they accomplish it through sheer persistence, through the accumulated wisdom of millions of years of trial and error, through a determination that transcends the brief span of any individual life. Monarch butterflies navigate using the position of the sun and an internal compass. Each fall, millions of monarchs leave their summer breeding grounds in Canada and the northern United States and fly south to spend the winter in the mountains of central Mexico, some traveling over 3,000 miles to reach forests they have never seen, forests their parents and grandparents never saw, following a route passed down not through learning, but through inheritance. To accomplish this extraordinary feat of navigation, monarchs use a time-compensated sun compass, a biological mechanism that allows them to determine direction by the sun's position, while accounting for its movement across the sky throughout the day. Special photoreceptors in their eyes detect the angle of sunlight, while an internal circadian clock in their brain tells them what time it is, and by combining these two pieces of information, they can maintain a steady southwest heading day after day, even when clouds obscure the sun, even when winds blow them off course. Scientists have also discovered that monarchs can sense the Earth's magnetic field, giving them a backup navigation system when visual cues fail, and some evidence suggests they may even use landmarks, memorizing mountain ranges and coastlines on their journey south. When they finally arrive at their destination, they cluster by the millions on the same trees their ancestors used, coating the branches in a living blanket of orange and black, and there they wait through the winter in a state of semi-dormancy, conserving their energy for the long flight north in spring. It is navigation without maps, without GPS, without any of the tools we would consider essential, and yet they find their way with a precision that still amazes scientists who study them. A single honeybee colony can produce 100 kilograms of honey in 1 year. This golden abundance is not created quickly or easily, but rather represents the cumulative work of thousands of bees over countless flights, each foraging trip yielding just a tiny droplet of nectar that must be processed and concentrated and stored with meticulous care. A single bee might visit 5,000 flowers in a day, gathering nectar in her honey stomach, a specialized organ separate from her digestive system. And when she returns to the hive, she passes this precious cargo to house bees who begin the transformation process. They add enzymes that break down complex sugars. They fan their wings to evaporate excess water. They move the ripening honey from cell to cell until its moisture content drops below 18%, and it becomes stable enough to store for months or even years without spoiling. The colony keeps some of this honey for itself, feeding it to larvae and storing it as emergency rations for winter, when flowers are scarce. But in a good year, with abundant blooms and favorable weather, the surplus can be staggering, enough to fill frame after frame with cells capped in pristine white wax. Each kilogram of honey represents about 150,000 kilometers of flight, millions of flower visits, weeks of processing and storing, and the coordinated labor of a colony working as one organism with many thousands of parts. When we taste honey, we are tasting summer condensed and preserved, sunlight transformed by flowers and concentrated by bees into something sweet and timeless, a gift from insects who ask nothing in return, but to be allowed to continue their ancient work. Ants can carry objects 50 times their own body weight. Watch an ant struggling across a sidewalk with a breadcrumb larger than her entire body, or see a line of leaf-cutter ants marching through the rainforest, each one balancing a piece of leaf like a green sail above her head, and you are witnessing strength on a scale that would be impossible for larger animals. This incredible power comes partly from simple physics. As body size decreases, the ratio of muscle cross-section to body weight becomes more favorable, allowing tiny creatures to perform feats of proportional strength that would crush their larger cousins. But ants have also evolved specialized adaptations that enhance this natural advantage, including muscles that attach to their exoskeleton in ways that maximize leverage, and a body plan that distributes weight efficiently across 6 legs. They use this strength not for fighting or competition, but for the quiet, essential work of colony maintenance, carrying food back to the nest, moving soil grain by grain to excavate new chambers, dragging their dead sisters to burial grounds outside the colony, relocating eggs and larvae when the nest is threatened. An individual ant carrying a seed might struggle for hours to traverse what is, in her scale, a vast and treacherous landscape of roots and rocks and grass stems. But she persists with single-minded determination, and if the load proves too heavy, she will return with sisters who together can accomplish what alone was impossible. It is strength placed entirely in service of the community, power without ego, and in their patient hauling of burdens that dwarf them, Ants remind us that persistence and cooperation can move mountains one grain at a time. Some dung beetles can pull 1,141 times their own weight. This makes them, pound for pound, the strongest animals on Earth, capable of feats that seem to defy the laws of physics and anatomy. These small, armored insects make their living by finding the dung of larger animals and rolling it into balls that they push backward across the ground, sometimes for impressive distances, searching for soft soil where they can bury their prize and either feed upon it or use it as a nursery chamber for their larvae. The competition among males for mates can be fierce, and to win a female's attention, a male dung beetle must prove his strength by battling rivals and demonstrating his ability to move massive balls of dung, resources that will nourish the next generation. To achieve this, they have evolved hind legs of extraordinary power, thick and muscular, capable of generating tremendous force when braced against the ground. Their entire body becomes a living lever, head down and front legs gripping the earth while the back legs push with relentless pressure, driving the dung ball backward across sand and soil, up slopes and around obstacles, never stopping until they reach their chosen burial site. In laboratory tests, scientists measured one particularly powerful species pulling with a force equivalent to a human moving 6 double-decker buses filled with passengers, a comparison so absurd it almost defies comprehension, and yet the beetle accomplishes this feat as casually as we might carry a bag of groceries. It is strength born of necessity, refined across millions of years, and in their humble work of recycling waste, these small beetles perform an essential service, breaking down dung and returning nutrients to the soil, keeping pastures healthy and ecosystems balanced through nothing more than their persistent, extraordinary strength. Caterpillars have 12 eyes, though they see the world very differently than we do. Arranged in small clusters on each side of their head, these simple eyes, called stemmata, cannot form the sharp, detailed images that our eyes create, cannot resolve fine patterns or read text or recognize faces. Instead, they perceive the world as gradients of light and shadow, as shapes and movements that tell them which direction to crawl to find more food, whether a darker patch ahead is a fresh leaf or a hole in their branch, whether that sudden shadow means a bird is diving toward them and it's time to freeze or drop on a silk thread to safety. Each stemmer sees only a small piece of the picture, and the caterpillar's brain stitches these fragments together into something useful, a rough map of brightness and darkness that guides them through their simple but purposeful existence. They can detect the polarization of light, helping them navigate by the angle of sunshine filtering through leaves, and they are especially sensitive to ultraviolet wavelengths, revealing patterns in plants that remain invisible to our eyes. For a creature whose entire purpose is to eat and grow, preparing for the transformation that awaits, these 12 simple eyes provide exactly enough information. Where is food? Where is danger? Where is safety? They live in a softer, simpler world than ours, where edges blur and details fade, but it is a world perfectly suited to their needs, and in their patient crawling from leaf to leaf, guided by light they process in ways we cannot imagine. They remind us that there are many ways to see, many ways to understand, and that even the simplest vision can be enough. When a caterpillar transforms into a butterfly, it completely liquefies inside its chrysalis. This is not a gentle reshaping, not a simple rearrangement of parts like a puzzle being solved, but rather a total dissolution, a melting down of almost everything the caterpillar was into a nutrient-rich soup from which the butterfly will be built entirely anew. Inside the protective shell of the chrysalis, enzymes break down muscle and organs and tissue, reducing the caterpillar's body to its essential components, leaving only a few specialized clusters of cells called imaginal discs, tiny blueprints that have been waiting dormant inside the caterpillar since it hatched from its egg, programmed with the instructions for building wings and compound eyes, and long, coiled tongues, and all the other structures a butterfly needs. These imaginal discs begin to grow, drawing on the nutrient soup surrounding them, following genetic instructions written millions of years ago, assembling piece by piece the body of a creature utterly unlike the one that entered the chrysalis. It is one of nature's most profound transformations, a complete reinvention of self. And though scientists understand the biochemistry and the genetic triggers, there remains something deeply mysterious about it, something that feels less like biology and more like alchemy. The caterpillar does not become a butterfly by growing wings and changing shape. It dies and is reborn, surrenders its form completely to create something new. And in that dark chamber, where dissolution and reconstruction happen side by side, one of nature's most beautiful metamorphoses unfolds in patient silence. The transformation from caterpillar to butterfly takes about 2 weeks of patient stillness. For 14 days, the chrysalis hangs motionless from its silk button, looking for all the world like nothing more than a dead leaf or a small twig, giving no sign of the extraordinary reorganization happening within its walls. The creature inside cannot eat, cannot move, cannot flee if danger approaches, and so it waits in complete vulnerability, trusting in camouflage and luck to see it through this perilous passage. Inside, imaginal discs multiply and differentiate, forming first the basic architecture of the adult body: head, thorax, abdomen, and then the intricate details, the facets of compound eyes, the scales on developing wings, the segments of legs and antennae. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, patterns begin to emerge, colors seeping into wings that are folded tight against the body like silk handkerchiefs, carefully packed away. The chrysalis itself may become translucent near the end, offering glimpses of the butterfly within, orange and black patterns visible through the thinning shell. And then one morning, when conditions are right, when temperature and humidity align, the chrysalis splits and the butterfly begins its slow emergence. It unfolds damp wings, pumps fluid through their veins to expand them to full size, and waits for them to harden in the sun before attempting its first flight. 2 weeks of stillness, of invisible transformation, of patience beyond our understanding. And then the world receives a butterfly where once there was only a caterpillar, a miracle wrapped in silk and time. Housefly feet are 10 million times more sensitive to sugar than human tongues. When a fly lands on your kitchen counter or alights on the rim of your glass, it is not simply resting, but tasting, reading the surface beneath its feet with sensors of almost unimaginable sensitivity. Each foot is covered with tiny hairs called chemosensilla, and within these hairs are receptors that can detect sugar molecules at concentrations so low they would be completely imperceptible to us, invisible to our relatively crude sense of taste. This extraordinary sensitivity makes perfect sense for a creature that lives fast and dies young, that needs to locate food sources quickly and efficiently in a world where every moment matters. A fly can land on a surface, taste it instantly through its feet, and decide in a fraction of a second whether to extend its proboscis and feed or move on to search elsewhere. If it detects sweetness, it will lower its sponging mouthparts and begin to feed, first secreting saliva to dissolve the food, and then soaking it up like a tiny living mop. This is why flies seem so attracted to our food, so persistent in their investigations of anything we leave uncovered. They are tasting everything they touch, and their feet tell them stories of sugar and sustenance that we cannot detect even with our tongues pressed directly against the same surface. It is a sense refined to near perfection, sensitivity beyond our comprehension, and in their constant tasting of the world, flies remind us that every creature perceives reality through its own unique sensory window. Fruit flies were the first living creatures ever sent into space. In 1947, long before any astronaut looked down at Earth from orbit, before Laika the dog or Ham, the chimpanzee, made their journeys beyond the atmosphere, a small capsule packed with fruit flies rode a captured V-2 rocket up through the thinning air and briefly touched the edge of space before falling back to Earth on a parachute. Scientists chose fruit flies for this pioneering journey because they are small and hardy, because their genetics were already well understood, and because researchers wanted to know what cosmic radiation might do to living tissue at high altitudes, wanted to see if chromosomes would be damaged, if mutations would occur, if life itself could survive the hostile environment beyond our protective atmosphere. The flies made the journey successfully, were recovered alive, and upon examination showed that life could indeed withstand the rigors of space travel, at least for brief periods. In the decades since, fruit flies have made many more trips aboard spacecraft, helping scientists understand how weightlessness affects development, how radiation impacts DNA, how circadian rhythms adapt to environments without day and night. These tiny insects, barely visible specks usually found hovering around overripe bananas, became unwitting pioneers, opening the door for all the human space exploration that would follow. And in their small bodies, tested in the vacuum and radiation of space, we learned lessons that made it possible for us to follow them upward toward the stars. Crickets chirp by rubbing their wings together in a process called stridulation. They do not have vocal cords like mammals, no vibrating membranes like the syrinx of a bird, and so they have evolved an entirely different way to sing, a method of making music through friction and resonance. Each male cricket has a specialized structure on his wings. One wing bears a scraper, a hardened edge with tiny teeth, while the other has a file, a rigid vein that acts as the instrument's frame. When the cricket wants to sing, he lifts his wings and rubs them together at remarkable speed, the scraper moving across the file to create vibrations that are amplified by a thin membrane on the wing that acts like the soundboard of a violin. The result is that familiar chirping that fills summer evenings and warm nights, a sound that carries surprising distance, considering it comes from something smaller than your thumb. Each species has its own signature rhythm, its own pattern of chirps and pauses, and females can identify males of their own kind by the specific cadence of their song. Some species produce continuous trills, others discrete chirps. Some sing in long sustained notes that rise and fall like waves, and together they create nighttime symphonies that have been part of Earth's soundscape for hundreds of millions of years. It is music made without breath, without voice, simply through the elegant mechanics of modified wings. And in their patient singing through darkness, crickets fill the warm nights with rhythms older than memory. The temperature can be estimated by counting cricket chirps. This remarkable correlation exists because crickets are cold-blooded creatures whose metabolism, and therefore their singing rate, varies directly with ambient temperature. As the air grows warmer, their muscles work faster and they chirp more frequently, And as it cools, they slow down, their song becoming more languid and spaced out. Naturalists in the 19th century noticed this pattern and developed simple formulas to convert chirps into degrees, the most famous being Dolbear's law, which suggests counting the number of chirps in 14 seconds and adding 40 to get the temperature in Fahrenheit. It is not perfectly accurate. Different species chirp at different base rates, and individual variation exists. But it is remarkably reliable as a general guide, a living thermometer that requires no batteries, no calibration, just patience and attention to the rhythm of the night. There is something deeply satisfying about this biological precision, this mathematical relationship between a tiny insect and the physical world around it. And when we sit on a summer evening counting the spaces between chirps to estimate the warmth of the air, we are participating in a small act of natural philosophy, reading the temperature from the orchestra of life itself. It reminds us that nature operates according to patterns and rhythms, that even the smallest creatures are woven into the physical laws that govern everything, and that, if we listen carefully enough, the world will tell us its secrets in 1,000 different voices. Cricket songs are actually love songs, males calling to potential mates in the darkness. Each sustained trill, each rhythmic sequence of chirps is an advertisement of fitness and availability, a male announcing his presence to any female within earshot and declaring his readiness to court and mate. The louder and more persistent his song, the more likely he is to attract a female, and so the males sing through the night with tireless dedication, pausing only briefly to rest their wings before resuming their serenade. Female crickets, who do not sing themselves, listen carefully to the competing males, using the quality and consistency of the song to evaluate potential partners. A male who can maintain a strong, steady chirp is demonstrating that he has found good food sources, that he is healthy and well fed, that his genes are worth passing on to the next generation. When a female chooses, she walks toward the source of the most appealing song, following the sound through grass and leaf litter until she finds the male responsible. And if she approves upon closer inspection, they will mate, and she will later lay her eggs in soft soil, where the next generation can hatch and begin the cycle again. But the male's work is not done when he finds a mate. After a brief respite, he returns to singing, hoping to attract additional females, maximizing his reproductive success by calling through the darkness for as long as his wings can produce sound. It is courtship reduced to its essence, beauty in service of continuation, and in their simple songs repeated through countless summer nights. Crickets have been practicing the art of attraction for hundreds of millions of years. Katydids create their night melodies through the same wing-rubbing technique as crickets. These close relatives of crickets, named for the sound some species make, a rhythmic katydid-katydidn't that seems to argue with itself through the trees, are often larger and more robust than their ground-dwelling cousins, adapted for life in the branches and foliage where they blend seamlessly with leaves. Their songs tend to be more varied and complex than cricket chirps, some producing long, sustained buzzes that can last for minutes without interruption, others creating intricate patterns of pulses and pauses that sound almost like Morse code, and still others making sharp, piercing calls that cut through the nighttime chorus. Like crickets, male katydids sing to attract mates and establish territories, and like crickets, they create their music by stridulation, though the specific structures on their wings may differ in shape and arrangement from species to species. In tropical forests, where katydid diversity reaches its peak, the nighttime soundscape can be almost overwhelming. dozens or even hundreds of species singing simultaneously, each at its own frequency and rhythm, creating layered symphonies of such complexity that scientists are still working to catalogue all the different songs. Some katydids have evolved to sing at ultrasonic frequencies, beyond the range of human hearing, conducting their courtship in a sonic dimension we cannot access without special equipment, while others produce calls so loud they can be heard from hundreds of meters away. It is a reminder that the night is far from silent, that darkness brings its own music, and that insects fill the warm air with sound we often hear but rarely consider. Background melodies to our summer evenings that have been playing since long before human ears existed to appreciate them. Most insects see colors humans cannot, including ultraviolet light. While our eyes contain 3 types of color receptors sensitive to red, green, and blue wavelengths, many insects have receptors that extend into the ultraviolet spectrum, allowing them to perceive colors and patterns that are completely invisible to us, a hidden dimension of light that paints the world in hues we cannot name or imagine. This ability evolved because it provides crucial survival advantages, helping them find food, avoid predators, and locate mates with greater precision. For a bee flying from flower to flower, ultraviolet vision reveals bold patterns on petals that guide her to the nectar like landing lights on a runway. Patterns that exist purely for insect eyes and remain hidden from mammals and birds. What appears to us as a simple yellow flower might display to a bee a complex bullseye of contrasting colors, with the ultraviolet center marking exactly where to land and probe for nectar. This hidden visual language has been refined over millions of years of coevolution between plants and pollinators, each adapting to better communicate with the other in wavelengths we cannot see. It is a reminder that reality is not fixed but filtered through the particular senses of each observer, that the world contains infinite layers of information, and that insects move through a richer, stranger visual landscape than the one we perceive when we look at the same scene. Flowers have evolved patterns visible only in ultraviolet, creating secret runways for pollinators. These nectar guides, as scientists call them, are one of nature's most elegant examples of coevolution. Plants and insects shaping each other across deep time until their needs and abilities align in perfect harmony. A flower that appears to us as uniformly white or yellow may reveal to a bee's ultraviolet sensitive eyes a dramatic starburst pattern, dark lines radiating from the center like spokes on a wheel, guiding the bee directly to where pollen and nectar await. Some flowers have ultraviolet patterns that change as they age, bright and conspicuous when freshly opened and full of nectar, fading as the flower is pollinated and its resources depleted, essentially hanging out a no vacancy sign that only insects can read. This saves the bee from wasting time on flowers that have nothing left to offer and directs her attention to the most rewarding blooms, making the entire pollination system more efficient. Other plants have evolved ultraviolet patterns that mimic the iridescent wings of certain insects, apparently exploiting the territorial instincts of male bees who investigate these false rivals and inadvertently pollinate the flower in the process. It is deception and cooperation intertwined, beauty with purpose. And when we walk through a meadow in full bloom, we are seeing only a fraction of the true spectacle, missing the hidden patterns that insects navigate by, the secret colors that dance just beyond the edge of our perception. Bees can recognize individual human faces. This remarkable cognitive ability was discovered through careful experiments in which bees were trained to associate photographs of specific human faces with sugar water rewards, and the results astounded researchers who had assumed such complex pattern recognition was beyond the capabilities of an insect brain. A bee's brain contains fewer than 1 million neurons. We have roughly 86 billion, and yet, with this tiny neural network, they can distinguish between different human faces with impressive accuracy, recognizing the same face from different angles and under varying lighting conditions. They accomplish this not by processing faces the way we do, by recognizing them as faces, but rather by memorizing the arrangement of features as complex visual patterns, treating a face the same way they might treat a particularly intricate flower. The bee breaks the image into components, dark patches here, bright areas there, lines and contrasts in specific relationships, and stores this template in memory, comparing new images against the stored pattern to make identifications. This ability likely evolved to help bees recognize and remember specific flowers and locations, but it demonstrates a cognitive flexibility that researchers are still working to fully understand, a capacity for learning and memory that seems impossible given the tiny size of the organ doing the processing. It is a humbling reminder that intelligence comes in many forms, that complex problems can be solved with surprising efficiency by nervous systems organized differently than our own, and that we should never underestimate the cognitive capabilities of creatures we assume to be simple. Ants leave invisible chemical trails for their sisters to follow. When a scout ant discovers food and begins her journey back to the colony, she does not return in silence, but rather lays down a chemical breadcrumb trail, touching her abdomen to the ground at intervals to deposit tiny droplets of pheromone that mark the path she has taken. These pheromones are volatile organic compounds, different mixtures for different messages, and they evaporate relatively quickly, ensuring that only the most recently traveled and therefore most relevant paths remain strongly marked. When her nestmates detect this trail, they can follow it back to the food source, and if they too find the resource valuable, they reinforce the trail with their own pheromones on the return journey, creating a positive feedback loop where more traffic leads to a stronger trail which leads to more traffic. Gradually, the most productive paths become highways of scent, leading dozens or hundreds of workers to the same location, while less rewarding routes fade away as their pheromones evaporate unanswered. This is how ant colonies solve complex logistical problems without central planning, without any individual ant understanding the full picture, simply through the accumulation of individual decisions and chemical signals that persist just long enough to guide the next traveler. Different pheromones convey different messages: alarm pheromones that spread panic and trigger defensive responses, recruitment pheromones that call for help with large food items or construction projects, territory markers that define the boundaries between neighboring colonies. To us, the ground appears blank and odorless, but to an ant, the world is written in layers of scent, a constantly updating map of opportunities and dangers, of paths worth following and areas to avoid. It is communication reduced to chemistry, language without sound, and in their patient following of invisible trails laid down by thousands of sisters, ants demonstrate that complex coordination can emerge from simple rules repeated across many individuals. An ant colony functions like a single superorganism with millions of parts. No ant gives orders. No queen directs traffic or makes strategic decisions about where to forage or when to expand the nest. Instead, the colony's behavior emerges from countless small interactions between individuals following simple rules, each ant responding to local conditions and chemical signals. And from this decentralized system arises something that resembles thought, something that solves problems and adapts to challenges with a sophistication that seems impossible without a central brain. The colony as a whole can make decisions about whether to move to a new nest site, can allocate workers efficiently between different tasks based on changing needs, can defend itself against invaders and recover from disasters, and yet no individual ant comprehends these colony-level behaviors. A single ant separated from her sisters is almost helpless, confused, capable of only the simplest actions, but connected to the colony through chemical signals and physical interactions. She becomes part of something far greater than herself, a node in a distributed network that collectively achieves what no individual could accomplish alone. Scientists studying ant colonies have found parallels to neural networks, to immune systems, to economic markets, any system where local interactions between simple components give rise to complex global behaviors. The colony breathes, the colony learns, the colony remembers, and all of this happens without any ant understanding that she is part of something larger, simply by each one doing her small part in response to the signal she receives from her immediate neighbors. Some ant colonies can contain over 20 million individuals working in perfect harmony. To imagine such a population is almost impossible for us. It would be like compressing the entire population of metropolitan New York into a space no larger than a house, and yet having everyone know their role, fulfill their duties without supervision, and coordinate their activities so smoothly that food flows from foragers to nurses to larvae. Waste is removed. Intruders are detected and expelled, and new chambers are excavated precisely when and where they are needed. These super colonies, as scientists call them, can spread across vast territories with multiple interconnected nests and trails stretching for hundreds of meters, and yet they maintain their cohesion through the constant exchange of pheromones and the recognition of shared colony odor, a chemical signature that marks sister from stranger. Within this enormous population, ants are born into roles they will fulfill for their entire lives. Some will be foragers, venturing out to find food. Others will be nurses, tending eggs and larvae in the dark nursery chambers. Some will be builders, moving soil grain by grain to expand the nest. And a few will be soldiers, with enlarged heads and powerful mandibles ready to defend the colony against any threat. The queen, despite her title, is not a ruler, but simply an egg-laying machine, the reproductive heart of the colony, and she may live for decades, producing millions of daughters over her lifetime, while her workers, who live for only months, replace themselves generation after generation in an endless cycle. It is society perfected through 150 million years of evolution, cooperation so complete that individuality almost disappears, and in their vast numbers moving as one, these ants remind us that unity can achieve what no individual effort could accomplish. Leafcutter ants don't eat leaves. They cultivate fungus gardens underground. When you see a line of these ants marching through a Central or South American forest, each one carrying a semicircular piece of leaf held above her head like a tiny green parasol, you might assume they are bringing food back to the colony, but the reality is far stranger and more sophisticated. Leafcutter ants don't eat leaves. They cultivate fungus gardens underground. When you see these ants marching through a forest, each carrying a piece of leaf above her head like a tiny green parasol, they are not bringing food for themselves, but raw material for their gardens. Deep in their nest, in warm, humid chambers, they chew the leaves into pulp and use it as compost for a specialized fungus that grows nowhere else in nature. This fungus is their true food source, and they tend it with the care of master gardeners, weeding out competing fungi, adjusting temperature and humidity, and harvesting the nutritious fungal growths to feed their colony. It is agriculture in its purest form, a farming system refined across millions of years. These fungus gardens have been tended by ants for 50 million years. Long before humans planted their first crops, before we even existed as a species, leafcutter ants had already domesticated their fungus, selectively cultivating strains that grew well in their underground chambers and provided the best nutrition. Each colony maintains its own genetic line of fungus, passed from queen to daughter when a young queen leaves to start her own nest, carrying a small starter culture in a special pouch beneath her mouth. This unbroken chain of cultivation stretches back through geological epochs, an agricultural tradition older than mountains. Termites build towering mounds with natural air conditioning systems. These structures, rising from African and Australian plains like earthen cathedrals, are marvels of passive climate control. Through careful positioning of vents and channels, termites create air currents that draw hot air up and out while pulling cooler air in from below, maintaining the stable temperature their fungus gardens require. Inside these mounds, millions of termites live and work in darkness, and the colony breathes through its architecture, a living building that regulates itself without machinery or thought. Some termite mounds can be over 30 feet tall and last for centuries. Built grain by grain from soil and saliva, these structures can house millions of termites across generations. The original builders long dead, while their descendants continue to maintain and expand the ancestral home. Some mounds in Africa are estimated to be over 1,000 years old, rising and falling with the fortunes of the colonies within, monuments to patience and collective effort that dwarf any human construction when scaled to the size of their builders. Insects were the first animals to achieve powered flight, millions of years before birds. They took to the air in the Carboniferous period, when the atmosphere was rich with oxygen and the competition for resources drove innovation. Those first flights were clumsy experiments, but they opened up entirely new dimensions of existence, and insects diversified into the vast aerial realm with stunning creativity, developing wings of gossamer and chitin that caught the light like stained glass. A dragonfly can fly forward, backward, up, down, and hover in place. Their 4 wings operate independently, each controlled by separate flight muscles, giving them maneuverability that surpasses even the most sophisticated helicopters. They can change direction in an instant, accelerate with startling speed, and hang motionless in the air while they scan for prey with their enormous compound eyes. It is aerial mastery perfected across 300 million years. Dragonflies catch their prey with a 95% success rate, making them nature's most efficient hunters. When a dragonfly locks onto a flying insect, the chase is usually over before it begins, the dragonfly calculating intercept vectors with its simple brain and adjusting its flight path. Mid-pursuit to meet its target precisely where it will be, not where it currently is. Despite this lethal efficiency, their hunting appears graceful, almost leisurely, a slow dance through summer air that belies the mathematical precision guiding every movement. Butterflies can see their own wing patterns and use them to recognize their species. When a butterfly encounters another in flight, a brief moment of visual recognition occurs, each one reading the colors and patterns displayed on the other's wings like a living identification card. This ability helps them find appropriate mates and avoid wasting energy courting the wrong species. And it suggests a level of self-awareness we rarely attribute to insects, a recognition that I look like this, and therefore others who look like this are my kind. The scales on butterfly wings are actually tiny, flattened hairs arranged like roof tiles. Each wing is covered with thousands upon thousands of these delicate structures, overlapping in precise rows that create the patterns and colors we admire. If you touch a butterfly wing, some of these scales transfer to your fingers as colored dust. And though the butterfly can still fly with scales missing, each one lost is a tiny piece of its beauty, given away forever. Each scale can contain multiple layers that create iridescent colors through light interference. These structural colors, as scientists call them, are not pigments, but rather microscopic architectures that bend and split light waves, causing certain wavelengths to amplify while others cancel out. The result is colors that shift with a viewing angle, that shimmer and flash as the butterfly moves through sunlight, blues and greens and purples of almost metallic intensity that no pigment could match. Some butterfly wings don't use pigments at all, just microscopic structures that bend light. The famous blue morpho butterfly of South American rainforests owes its stunning azure brilliance not to blue pigment, but to layers of scales that reflect only blue wavelengths. And when the butterfly is seen from different angles, the blue intensifies or fades like a living hologram. It is color created by geometry, beauty born from physics. Moths outnumber butterflies by a ratio of about 9-1. For every butterfly fluttering through a garden by day, 9 species of moths fly unseen through the night, and yet they receive a fraction of the attention, overlooked because they conduct their lives in darkness. They are the night shift of pollination, the hidden workers that keep nocturnal flowers fertilized and ecosystems balanced while we sleep. Many moths are just as colorful as butterflies but fly under the cover of darkness. Some bear patterns of pink and yellow and green as vivid as any butterfly, their beauty hidden from casual observers who never see them resting on tree bark during the day or visiting flowers after sunset. They have been painted by evolution with the same care as their diurnal cousins, proving that beauty needs no audience to exist. The atlas moth has a wingspan of nearly 12 inches, but lives for only about a week. These giants of the moth world emerge from their cocoons with wings the size of dinner plates, patterned in russet and cream with transparent windows that make them look like dried leaves, and they fly through tropical forests searching for mates before their brief lives burn out. Without mouths to feed them, they survive on stored energy alone, each day bringing them closer to their inevitable end. Walking stick insects can remain motionless for hours, becoming invisible through stillness. Their entire survival strategy depends on looking like the twigs and branches they rest upon, and so they freeze when they're threatened, sometimes holding the same position for so long that predators simply cannot distinguish them from the vegetation around them. It is camouflage achieved not through color change, but through patience, through the discipline of absolute stillness. Some stick insects can regenerate lost limbs when they molt. If a predator grabs a leg, the stick insect can voluntarily detach it and escape. And during its next molt, a new leg will begin to grow from the stump, smaller at first, but functional, and with subsequent molts, it will grow closer to normal size. It is a remarkable ability to heal, to remake what was lost, praying mantises can turn their heads 180 degrees, the only insect capable of this. While other insects must turn their entire body to look behind them, the mantis can swivel its triangular head on its long neck, tracking prey or scanning for threats with an almost vertebrate-like flexibility. Those large eyes stare with unsettling directness, and when a mantis turns to watch you watching it, there is a moment of connection across the vast gulf that separates insect from mammal. A praying mantis has 5 eyes, 2 large compound eyes and 3 simple eyes. The 2 prominent compound eyes dominate its face, giving the mantis its characteristic stare. But between them sit 3 small simple eyes called ocelli that detect light and shadow, helping the mantis maintain stability and orientation. Together, these 5 eyes create a visual system of remarkable sophistication, allowing the mantis to judge distance with precision and strike at prey with lightning speed. Bombardier beetles produce boiling chemical explosions to defend themselves. When threatened, they can spray a jet of scalding liquid from the tip of their abdomen with startling accuracy, the temperature reaching near boiling point, hot enough to cause real pain to any predator foolish enough to attack. This chemical weapon is their last resort, and it almost always works. This chemical reaction happens in a special chamber inside their body. The beetle stores 2 separate chemicals in different compartments, keeping them apart until the moment of danger, and when threatened, it mixes them in a reinforced reaction chamber where they explode into a boiling spray. The chamber walls are thick enough to contain the blast, and the beetle can aim and fire this defensive weapon multiple times in rapid succession. Diving beetles carry a bubble of air underwater, using it like a scuba tank. Before submerging, they trap air beneath their wing covers, creating a silvery layer that clings to their body as they swim. And they breathe from this portable air supply while hunting underwater. As oxygen depletes, the bubble absorbs more from the surrounding water, extending their dive time far beyond what the initial air volume would suggest. Water striders walk on water using surface tension and water-repellent legs. Their feet are covered with thousands of tiny hairs that trap air and prevent water from touching their skin, and they distribute their weight across long, splayed legs so that they dimple the water's surface without breaking through. They skate across ponds and streams as effortlessly as we walk on solid ground. Whirligig beetles swim in circles on the water's surface, half their eyes above water, half below. These remarkable insects have split-level vision, each eye divided horizontally so they can simultaneously watch for predators in the air above and prey in the water below. They spin in tight groups on the surface film, and their scientific name, Gerinus, means circle, a perfect description of their endless aquatic dance. Honeybees communicate the location of flowers through an elaborate dance. When a forager returns to the hive after finding a rich source of nectar, she performs a figure-8 pattern on the vertical comb, waggling her body as she traces the central line. And this waggle dance encodes precise information about distance and direction that her sisters can decode and follow. This waggle dance encodes both distance and direction in precise choreography. The angle of the dance relative to vertical indicates the angle to the food source relative to the sun, and the duration of the waggle run indicates how far to fly. It is a language of movement and vibration, abstract information conveyed through the body's motion in darkness. A single bee might visit 5,000 flowers in a single day. From dawn until dusk, she flies from bloom to bloom in relentless pursuit of nectar and pollen, covering miles of ground and making hundreds of decisions about which flowers are worth visiting and which have already been depleted. Her life is measured in weeks, and every day counts. Bees can learn and remember complex routes back to their hive. They memorize landmarks, create mental maps of their territory, and can navigate through complex landscapes with impressive accuracy, returning to productive flower patches day after day and sharing their knowledge with nestmates through their waggle dances. Despite their tiny brains, they are capable of sophisticated spatial reasoning. Bumblebees can fly in cold weather when other bees cannot. They warm their bodies by shivering their flight muscles before takeoff, generating heat through rapid muscle contractions without moving their wings, and they maintain this warmth while flying through cold spring mornings when honeybees remain huddled in their hives. This allows them to pollinate early blooming flowers when no other insects are active. They warm their bodies by shivering their flight muscles before takeoff. Before a bumblebee can fly on a cold spring morning, she must first generate heat, and she does this through rapid muscle contractions that create warmth without moving her wings, essentially exercising in place until her body temperature rises enough to allow flight. This internal furnace allows her to function when the air temperature would leave other bees grounded, and once airborne, she maintains this warmth through the constant work of flight. It is a remarkable adaptation that gives bumblebees access to early blooming flowers when competition is scarce, and explains why we sometimes see these fuzzy pilots buzzing through gardens on mornings when the air still holds the bite of winter. Mosquitoes have existed for 100 million years and have outlived the dinosaurs. These tiny vampires watched the great reptiles fall to extinction and continued on through ice ages and continental shifts, adapting to every climate and every corner of the planet except Antarctica. They have survived every mass extinction event of the last 100 million years, persisting through catastrophes that wiped out countless other species, and their fossil record shows forms remarkably similar to the mosquitoes that hum around us today. Their persistence is both remarkable and humbling, a reminder that success in evolution is not measured by size or strength, but by adaptability. Only female mosquitoes bite. Males feed exclusively on flower nectar. The males drift through warm evenings sipping from blossoms, gentle and harmless pollinators going about their quiet business, while females seek blood meals only when they need the protein to develop their eggs. Without blood, most female mosquitoes would be content to join the males at flowers, feeding on nectar and plant juices, but reproduction demands more concentrated nutrition. And so, they have evolved specialized mouthparts that can pierce skin and locate blood vessels. Both genders begin life as aquatic larvae, wriggling through pond water and breathing through snorkels at the surface before pupating and emerging as adults into the aerial world. Butterflies and moths existed before flowering plants and helped drive their evolution. These ancient insects were already flying through Cretaceous forests when the first flowers began to appear, and the relationship that formed between pollinator and bloom grew so intertwined over millions of years that each shaped the other's development. Flowers evolved colors and patterns to attract insect pollinators, while butterflies and moths developed longer tongues to reach deeper nectar stores. And this mutual influence created partnerships of astonishing specificity. Some flowers that can only be pollinated by one species of moth, some moths whose proboscis exactly matches the depth of one particular flower's nectar tube. It is coevolution written in petals and wings. Silk moths produce thread so strong it was once used in crosshairs for telescopes. Before modern synthetic materials, the finest optical instruments relied on silk strands finer than human hair. woven by caterpillars and harvested with care. These threads were strong enough to remain taut across the focal plane of a telescope, delicate enough to provide precision alignment, and consistent enough to be reliable for scientific measurement. Even now, natural silk remains one of the strongest natural fibers known, stronger than steel of the same diameter. A silkworm can produce a single strand of silk up to 900 meters long. This continuous filament flows from specialized glands in the caterpillar's head as it wraps itself in layer upon layer, building the cocoon that will protect it during metamorphosis. And the thread continues without break, winding back and forth in figure-8 patterns until the caterpillar has enclosed itself completely. That single thread, if carefully unwound, can stretch nearly a kilometer without breaking, a testament to the engineering capabilities hidden in something so small and soft. Glowworms aren't worms at all, but the larval stage of certain beetles. These luminescent creatures rest in caves and on forest floors, their segmented bodies producing a cold greenish light that attracts prey and confuses predators. And despite their name, they crawl on legs and eventually transform into winged adults. Some species of glowworm live in caves where they hang silk threads coated with sticky droplets, and their bioluminescent glow attracts flying insects that become tangled in these threads like stars caught in invisible nets. When they mature into adult beetles, most species lose their glow and live out their remaining days in relative darkness, their purpose fulfilled, their light extinguished. They produce their light through a chemical reaction with zero waste heat. Unlike fire or incandescent bulbs that lose most of their energy as heat, dissipating warmth into the surrounding air, bioluminescence converts nearly all its chemical energy directly into visible light through a reaction between a molecule called luciferin and an enzyme called luciferase. The result is a cold light, a glow without warmth, efficient to a degree that human technology has yet to match despite all our engineering sophistication. This efficiency is essential for creatures so small, who cannot afford to waste precious energy on heat production when light alone serves their purpose. This bioluminescence is one of nature's most efficient light sources. Fireflies, glowworms, and certain marine organisms have mastered the art of cold light, illuminating the darkness without generating heat, creating beauty without burning fuel, glowing like living stars scattered across the earth. The efficiency can reach 95% or higher, meaning almost all the chemical energy goes into producing light rather than being lost to heat. And this stands in stark contrast to incandescent bulbs that waste most of their energy, or even LED lights that still produce significant heat. It is a reminder that evolution, given enough time, can solve problems with elegance that surpasses our most advanced technology. Some ants tend aphids like humans tend cattle, protecting them for their sweet secretions. They guard the aphids from predators, gently stroking them with their antennae to encourage the release of honeydew, and they move them to fresh feeding sites when the current plant becomes depleted, essentially herding their tiny livestock from pasture to pasture. Some ant species even bring aphid eggs into their nests during winter, keeping them safe and warm until spring, when they carry the newly hatched aphids back outside and place them on fresh plant shoots. In exchange for this protection and care, the ants receive a steady supply of honeydew, a sugary liquid that the aphids produce as they feed. On plant sap, it is animal husbandry perfected long before humans ever domesticated sheep or cattle, a farming system that has been running smoothly for millions of years. aphids can reproduce without mating when conditions are right. Through a process called parthenogenesis, female aphids can give birth to live young that are genetic clones of themselves, daughter after daughter, without the need for males, allowing populations to explode when food is abundant and conditions are favorable. Each female can produce several nymphs per day, and these daughters mature quickly and begin producing their own offspring within a week, creating exponential growth that would be impossible with sexual reproduction. This strategy allows aphids to take maximum advantage of good conditions, flooding suitable plants with their numbers before predators can catch up or before the season changes. In favorable weather, a single aphid's descendants could theoretically fill a sphere as large as Earth. The mathematics of exponential reproduction are staggering. If every aphid survived and reproduced at maximum rate without any checks, the biomass would quickly become astronomical, beyond anything nature could actually support. It is a thought experiment that illustrates the raw reproductive potential locked inside these tiny insects, though such growth never happens in reality because predators, parasites, disease, and resource limitations keep populations in check. Fortunately, ladybugs keep their populations in natural balance. These spotted predators consume aphids by the thousands, their appetite preventing the exponential growth that would otherwise overwhelm gardens and crops. And they arrive in gardens just as aphid populations begin to surge, drawn by the scent of their prey. Ladybugs are considered symbols of good luck in many cultures around the world. From European folklore that promises wishes granted if a ladybug lands on you, to Asian traditions that see them as harbingers of prosperity, these small beetles have captured human imagination and affection across continents and centuries. Perhaps it is their gentle nature, their beneficial role in gardens, or simply their charming spotted appearance that has earned them this universal fondness. But whatever the reason, the ladybug occupies a special place in our collective mythology, one of the few insects regarded with almost universal warmth. When threatened, ladybugs can release a bitter yellow fluid from their leg joints. This defensive secretion, called reflex bleeding, tastes terrible to predators and contains alkaloid compounds that can cause mild irritation, effectively convincing birds and other hunters to drop the ladybug and seek less unpleasant prey. The fluid oozes from joints in the legs when the beetle feels endangered, and though it appears to be bleeding, this is actually a controlled release of hemolymph mixed with defensive chemicals, a last resort warning that this small, colorful insect is not as helpless as it appears. After deploying this defense, the ladybug typically remains motionless for a while, playing dead, adding one more layer of protection to its survival strategy. The spots on a ladybug fade as it ages, like a tiny calendar written on its shell. A young ladybug emerges from its pupa with bright, vivid colors and sharply defined spots. But as weeks pass, and the beetle goes about its work of hunting aphids and reproducing, the pigments in its exoskeleton gradually break down under exposure to sunlight and the simple passage of time. The spots become less distinct. The background color may lighten or dull, and an experienced observer can estimate a ladybug's age simply by examining the clarity of its markings. It is a visual record of a life lived, a slow fading like photographs left too long in the sun. Butterflies must warm their wings in the sun before they can fly. On cool mornings, you might see butterflies resting motionless on flowers or leaves, wings spread wide to catch the first rays of sunlight. And they are not simply enjoying the warmth, but actively raising their body temperature to the threshold required for flight. Their flight muscles cannot generate enough power when cold, and so they bask like tiny solar panels, absorbing radiant energy until their internal temperature climbs high enough for their wings to beat with sufficient speed. Only then do they lift off, and on particularly cold mornings, this warming period can take many minutes of patient stillness. They cannot fly if their body temperature drops below a certain threshold. Butterflies are cold-blooded creatures whose activity levels rise and fall with ambient temperature, and there exists a specific temperature below which flight becomes impossible, the muscles simply unable to contract fast enough to generate lift. This threshold varies by species, but for many butterflies, it hovers around 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and when temperatures drop below this point, they become grounded, vulnerable, waiting for the sun's return. This is why butterflies are most active on warm, sunny days. Heat and light together create the perfect conditions for butterfly activity, and on such days, meadows and gardens become stages for their courtship flights and feeding rituals, while cloudy or cool days see far fewer butterflies on the wing. Moths, conversely, can shiver to warm their flight muscles. Unlike their butterfly cousins who rely primarily on external warmth, many moths have evolved the ability to generate heat internally through rapid muscle vibrations, the same technique bumblebees use. This allows them to fly on cool evenings when butterflies remain dormant, giving moths access to night-blooming flowers and reducing competition with daytime pollinators. The death's head hawk moth can squeak when disturbed. This large moth, named for the distinctive skull-like pattern that marks its thorax in shades of pale yellow against dark brown, possesses an ability almost unique among insects. It can produce audible sound through its proboscis, a shrill squeaking that startles predators, and has contributed to the moth's sinister reputation in folklore and superstition for centuries. The sound is loud enough for humans to hear clearly from several feet away, an unsettling noise that seems incongruous coming from an insect, something that feels almost like a voice, and it adds to the moth's already dramatic presence. In European folklore, the appearance of a death's head hawk moth was considered an omen, and when combined with its ability to vocalize, this large moth seemed to bridge the gap between the insect world and something more knowing, more aware. It produces this sound by forcing air through its proboscis. Unlike the wing-rubbing stridulation of crickets or the buzzing drone of bee wings cutting through air, the death's head hawk moth creates sound through an entirely different mechanism, drawing air into its pharynx through the spiracles along its body, and then expelling it rapidly through the modified mouthparts of its proboscis, creating vibrations that resonate as an audible squeak or chirp. The exact mechanism is still being studied by entomologists. The anatomy involved is complex and unusual, but the result is unmistakable. A sound that carries emotional weight, despite coming from a creature with no concept of emotion. A cry that seems to express alarm or protest. When combined with the moth's large size, often with a wingspan of 5 inches or more, and that haunting skull marking, the squeak creates an impression memorable and unsettling enough to have earned the species a place in literature and film as a symbol of mystery, death, and foreboding. Some caterpillars can imitate the appearance of bird droppings for protection. This disguise, perfected through millions of years of natural selection and evolutionary refinement, allows young caterpillars to rest in plain sight on leaves and stems without attracting the attention of hungry birds, who see only an unappetizing waste product and move on to search for actual prey elsewhere in the foliage. The caterpillar's body is patterned in browns and whites, with remarkable attention to detail, sometimes with irregular splotches that mimic the texture of droppings, often with a glossy sheen produced by their skin that mimics the wet appearance of fresh waste, and some species even position themselves at angles that enhance the illusion. The disguise is convincing enough to fool most predators, and it represents one of nature's more humble but effective survival strategies. It is camouflage through mimicry of the unappealing, safety earned not by resembling something beautiful or dangerous, but by resembling something no bird would consider worth investigating, let alone eating. Swallowtail caterpillars have a forked orange organ they extend when threatened, called an osmeterium. This remarkable structure normally stays hidden inside a fold of skin just behind the caterpillar's head, invisible and waiting, but when the caterpillar feels threatened by a predator, or even by the probing of a curious finger, it rapidly everts the organ in a fraction of a second, turning it inside out like a pair of bright orange or red horns that suddenly appear from nowhere, rising up like twin antennae. The dramatic display, sudden and unexpected, often startles predators long enough for the caterpillar to escape or successfully discourages further attack, the would-be hunter deciding that this strange color-changing prey might be more trouble than it's worth. Different swallowtail species have osmeterium of slightly different colors and shapes, but all serve the same purpose. This organ releases a smell that deters predators without causing harm. The osmeterium secretes volatile compounds that smell distinctly unpleasant to birds and other predators, often described by humans as resembling rancid butter, overripe pineapple, or sour milk. And this olfactory warning, combined with the visual shock of the suddenly appearing orange horns, is usually enough to convince attackers to seek easier, less alarming prey elsewhere. The caterpillar can retract the organ just as quickly as it deployed it, pulling it back and tucking it safely away inside the fold of skin until the next threat appears. And this defensive mechanism, both chemical and visual, allows swallowtail caterpillars to feed relatively openly on the plants during daylight hours, when many other caterpillar species must hide in rolled leaves or venture out only under cover of darkness. Ants have been farming fungus millions of years before humans farmed anything, long before our ancestors planted the first seeds in Mesopotamian soil or domesticated the first wild grains, before we even existed as a species walking upright across African plains. Leafcutter and Atin ants had already established sophisticated agricultural systems in underground chambers, cultivating specialized fungi that grow nowhere else in nature and depend entirely on the ants for survival, just as the ants depend on the fungus for food. This mutualism has been refined across tens of millions of years into a relationship so complete that neither partner can survive without the other, the fungus having lost the ability to reproduce on its own, the ants having adapted their entire social structure around its cultivation. It is agriculture in its purest and oldest form, a partnership that predates our entire evolutionary lineage and will likely continue long after we are gone. Some species of ants have evolved specialized soldier castes with enlarged heads. These soldiers are born different from their sisters, their development altered by diet and pheromones during the larval stage, to produce individuals with disproportionately large heads, equipped with massive mandibles that can crush and cut with formidable force. They serve as the colony's defenders, their size and strength making them formidable opponents to any invader foolish enough to attack the nest, though they are often less efficient at delicate tasks like caring for larvae or processing food. and so they must be fed by their smaller worker sisters, who perform the daily maintenance that keeps the colony running. It is biological specialization taken to an extreme, individuals shaped by the needs of the collective into living weapons. These soldier ants use their heads to block tunnel entrances like living doors. When danger threatens from outside, when a predator or rival colony attempts to invade through one of the nest's entrances, a soldier will position herself in a narrow tunnel, with her oversized head plugging the passage completely, and there she will remain, immovable as stone, her body becoming part of the architecture itself. Her head fits the tunnel diameter so precisely that it functions as a biological door, and she will hold this position for hours if necessary, turning away any intruder that attempts to force entry. A single individual protecting hundreds or thousands of sisters through nothing more than patient, stubborn presence in the right place at the right time. Honeypot ants serve as living storage jars, their abdomens swollen with nectar. In desert environments where food sources are unpredictable and seasons of plenty must sustain the colony through long periods of scarcity, certain worker ants take on a remarkable role. They become living storage vessels, fed by their sisters until their abdomens swell to many times their normal size, stretched thin and translucent, like amber balloons filled with golden liquid. These repletes, as scientists call them, sacrifice their mobility and become living pantries, their bodies devoted entirely to storing the colony's surplus for leaner times ahead. They hang from the ceiling of the nest, offering food to hungry colony members. Unable to move with their massive, distended abdomens, these honeypot ants cluster on chamber ceilings in special rooms deep in the nest, clinging upside down in rows like living grapes. And when food becomes scarce above ground, workers come to them and stroke their heads, requesting a droplet of stored nectar, which the repletes regurgitate to feed their hungry sisters. It is altruism of an almost unimaginable degree. Individuals who give up their own freedom and transform their bodies into resources for the common good, living their entire lives as living warehouses in the darkness below ground. Jewel wasps can perform brain surgery on cockroaches, turning them into docile hosts. This tiny, iridescent wasp has evolved one of nature's most disturbing and fascinating reproductive strategies. She hunts cockroaches much larger than herself, and through a series of precise stings, she injects venom directly into specific regions of the roach's brain, not to kill, but to control. The venom blocks specific neurotransmitters, leaving the cockroach's basic motor functions intact, but eliminating its motivation to escape, its will to flee, its drive for self-preservation. The wasp then leads the zombified roach by its antenna like a dog on a leash, guiding it step by docile step to her burrow. And the cockroach follows without resistance, walking calmly toward what will become both its tomb and nursery. Once inside, the wasp lays a single egg on the roach's body before sealing the chamber and departing. And the cockroach remains alive but docile, its brain modified just enough to remove the impulse to leave, while the wasp larva hatches days later and slowly consumes it from the inside, always eating non-essential tissues first to keep its host alive and fresh as long as possible. Though this seems horrific to our sensibilities, it is simply another solution to the problem of reproduction, neither cruel nor kind, just extraordinarily precise. A biological procedure refined across millions of years until it works with surgical accuracy. Despite their fearsome reputation, most wasp species never sting humans. Of the tens of thousands of wasp species that exist worldwide, scattered across every continent except Antarctica. Only a small fraction are aggressive toward people, and most go about their lives hunting other insects, pollinating flowers, or parasitizing pest species without ever interacting with humans at all. The social wasps that build paper nests near our homes and occasionally defend them with territorial aggression represent a tiny minority of wasp diversity, and even these usually sting only when defending their nest from what they perceive as a direct threat, or when accidentally trapped against skin or squeezed. The vast majority of wasps are solitary creatures, each female working alone to provision her own nest. And these solitary wasps are almost never aggressive, going about their work with single-minded focus and ignoring the large mammals that pass nearby. Wasps are essential pollinators and pest controllers in ecosystems worldwide. While bees receive most of the credit and attention for pollination, appearing on conservation posters and environmental campaigns, wasps quietly perform the same service for countless plant species, visiting flowers to drink nectar and inadvertently transferring pollen as they move from bloom to bloom. More importantly, their role as predators of caterpillars, flies, aphids, and other insects makes them invaluable for natural pest control in gardens, forests, and agricultural systems. A single wasp can capture dozens of caterpillars in a day, paralyzing them and carrying them back to provision her nest. And without wasps, many ecosystems would collapse under the weight of unchecked herbivore populations that would strip vegetation faster than it could regrow. Paper wasps create their nests by chewing wood fibers into a paper-like pulp. They scrape tiny fragments of wood from fence posts, dead trees, weathered boards, and plant stems, working their mandibles back and forth to break down the cellulose fibers and mixing them with saliva to create a building material that dries into a substance remarkably similar to the paper we use for writing and printing. This was, in fact, where humans got the original idea for paper making, observing wasps and eventually figuring out how to replicate their process industrially, though it took us thousands of years to understand what wasps had been doing instinctively since long before our species existed. Each wasp makes countless trips, gathering material bit by bit, building her nest fiber by fiber with patient dedication. Each nest is a multi-chambered nursery, crafted with geometric precision. The hexagonal cells fit together perfectly, maximizing space while minimizing material in a design so efficient that humans have adopted it for everything from honeycomb-structured packaging to architectural supports. Each cell houses a single larva that the adult wasps feed with chewed insects and tend with constant attention until it pupates and emerges as the next generation. The nest hangs from a single stalk, sometimes swaying gently in the breeze, a delicate cathedral of paper housing a small society, working in quiet coordination, each wasp knowing her role without instruction, building and feeding and defending according to instincts encoded in her genes. Insects breathe through tiny holes along their sides, called spiracles. They don't have lungs or noses like mammals, no central breathing organ that pumps air rhythmically in and out, but rather a series of small openings arranged in pairs along the sides of their thorax and abdomen. And these openings lead to branching tubes called tracheae that carry oxygen directly to cells throughout the body, bypassing the need for blood to transport it. It is a simpler system in some ways, requiring no blood to transport oxygen the way our cardiovascular system must, but it also limits how large insects can grow, since diffusion alone becomes insufficient beyond a certain body size. And this is why the largest insects in Earth's history lived during the Carboniferous period, when atmospheric oxygen was significantly higher than today. They don't have lungs. Air flows through branching tubes directly to their cells. This tracheal system delivers oxygen through passive diffusion in small insects and, in larger and more active species, through rhythmic body contractions that help pump air through the system, essentially breathing with their entire body rather than with a dedicated organ. The tracheae branch into smaller and smaller tubes called tracheoles that eventually reach individual cells, bringing oxygen directly to where it's needed without the intermediate step of loading it into blood and then unloading it at the destination. It is efficient for creatures of their size and explains why insects can be so extraordinarily active despite their tiny bodies, why a bee can beat her wings 190 times per second for hours, why a dragonfly can hunt with relentless energy throughout the day. An insect's blood is usually clear or greenish, not red like ours. When you see a mosquito filled with red blood after biting you, you are seeing your own blood inside her body, not hers, because insect hemolymph lacks the iron-based hemoglobin that makes vertebrate blood red and gives it that distinctive metallic smell. Insect blood looks more like pale amber or watery soup, sometimes with a faint greenish or yellowish tint from other compounds dissolved within it, and it flows through their body cavity in a much less organized way than our blood flows through vessels, bathing the organs directly rather than being confined to veins and arteries. This is because they don't use hemoglobin to carry oxygen. Since their tracheal system delivers oxygen directly to tissues through air-filled tubes, insects don't need oxygen-carrying proteins in their blood, and so their hemolymph serves primarily to transport nutrients from the digestive system to growing tissues, to carry hormones that coordinate development and behavior, and to circulate immune cells that fight infections and heal wounds. It is blood reimagined for a different body plan, performing some of the same functions as ours but through entirely different mechanisms. A reminder that evolution finds many pathways to solve the same fundamental problems of staying alive. The smallest insects are smaller than a grain of salt, but still perfectly formed. Fairy wasps, some measuring less than 0.2 millimeters in length, are among the tiniest insects known to science, and yet they possess all the structures necessary for life. Wings that beat and generate lift, legs that walk and grasp, eyes that detect light, antennae that sense chemicals, a brain that processes information and makes decisions, and reproductive organs that create the next generation. At this scale, they are barely visible to the naked eye, easily mistaken for specks of dust, and yet they are complete animals, hunting even smaller prey, navigating through forests of grass blades, living full lives in a world we can barely perceive. It defies comprehension that something so small can be so complex, that all the machinery of life can be compressed into a space smaller than the period at the end of this sentence. Despite their small size, insects are vital architects of life on Earth, quietly sustaining forests, gardens, and the air we breathe. They pollinate the majority of flowering plants, including most of the crops we depend on for food. They break down dead matter and return nutrients to the soil, preventing the world from drowning in its own waste. They feed countless birds, fish, amphibians, and mammals, forming the foundation of terrestrial food webs. Without insects, ecosystems would collapse within months. Forests would fall silent, flowers would fade without being pollinated, and the intricate web of life that sustains us all would unravel. And yet they accomplish all of this without fanfare, without recognition, simply by being what they are, by following instincts millions of years old, by living their brief lives with purpose and persistence. And so our quiet journey through the world of insects comes to a gentle close. We've traveled across millions of years, through transformations that dissolve and rebuild, across migrations that span generations, and into lives measured in days but perfected across eons. We've witnessed patience written into wings, cooperation built into colonies, and beauty hidden in scales too small to see without wonder. These tiny beings share this world with us, moving through their brief, purposeful lives mostly unseen. They pollinate the flowers that become our food. They recycle what falls. They feed the birds that wake us with song. In their vast numbers and quiet persistence, they remind us that life finds a way to flourish in every corner, in every size, in every small and perfect form. You are part of this same living world, breathing the same air, warmed by the same sun, woven into the same endless fabric of existence. But for now, there is nothing more to do. Just allow your body to sink deeper into rest. Let the day fall away behind you, and let the calm widen within you like wings unfolding in darkness. The world of small wonders will still be there tomorrow, moving through its ancient rhythms while you sleep. There is no need to hold on to anything. Just drift, like a butterfly on a summer breeze. Sleep well, and dream among the flowers. Good night. If you've enjoyed it, you can gently like, subscribe, or leave a thought in the comments.